The Sunday service at Calvary Ridge Baptist had been running for 112 years in Harrowfield, Tennessee, and in all that time, I doubt anything like what happened that morning had ever taken place inside those whitewashed walls. I'm Gerald Caulfield. I'm 61 years old, retired after 31 years with the Harrowfield Sheriff's Department, the last 14 of those as a detective. I've worked homicides, missing persons, financial fraud, domestic cases that would make your stomach turn. I thought I'd seen everything a man could see in this small corner of East Tennessee. I thought I'd stopped being surprised by the world sometime around age 40. I was wrong. It was a regular Sunday morning. Third week of October, the kind of morning that makes you remember why people used to write poems about Tennessee in autumn. The mountains had gone orange and crimson practically overnight, and the air coming off the ridge smelled like wood smoke and pine. My daughter Nora had picked me up at 8:45 sharp, which was her way of making sure I didn't talk myself out of going. I'd been talking myself out of things since her mother, Patricia, passed 3 years ago. Nora is 33. She's got her mother's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn jaw and, unfortunately for everyone involved, her mother's ability to see right through every excuse I've ever made. She'd married Beckett Harlow 2 years before Patricia died, so at least my wife had gotten to see that, had gotten to see her daughter walk down the aisle. Though Patricia had pulled me aside the night before the wedding and said something I'd chosen to file away and not think about. She said, "Gerald, you're the detective. Keep your eyes open." I'd laughed it off, said she was being protective. I stopped laughing about that about 4 months ago. That Sunday morning, we settled into the fourth pew from the front, same spot the Caulfield family had occupied since my father was a boy. Nora sat between me and Beckett the way she always did, like a bridge between two people who were politely tolerating each other. Beckett Harlow was 38, good-looking in that calculated way some men are, the way where you can tell they've practiced the smile in the mirror. He worked in commercial real estate out of Knoxville, drove a new truck every 2 years, and wore cologne you could smell from across a room. He'd always been perfectly friendly to me. That was the problem. There's friendly, and then there's performative, and in 31 years of law enforcement you learn to feel the difference in your back teeth. But Nora loved him. So I kept my eyes open and my mouth shut. Pastor Elwin was 20 minutes into his sermon when I first noticed the woman in the pew behind us. I noticed her because of what she was doing. Not praying, not listening, watching me. Every time I glanced back, her eyes were already on mine, direct and purposeful in a way that raised the hair on my arms. She was maybe 55, with close-cropped silver hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She was dressed simply. Dark blouse, dark slacks. No purse that I could see. She held nothing in her hands except a small blue box about the size of a thick paperback novel, wrapped in plain blue fabric like something from a department store gift section. When the congregation rose for the first hymn, she moved, not toward the aisle, directly behind me. I felt her hand press against mine, firm and deliberate, and the weight of the box transferred from her hands to mine so smoothly that Nora, standing right next to me, didn't register the movement at all. "You'll need this tonight, sir," she said, barely above a whisper, her mouth close to my ear. "Don't open it here. Don't show anyone." I turned immediately, the way a man with 3 decades of training turns when something is wrong. She was already moving down the side aisle, unhurried, her head down. By the time the song ended and people settled back into their seats, she was gone. I checked the vestibule after the service. Checked the parking lot. Nothing. No one remembered seeing her leave. The church secretary, a woman who had cataloged the attendance of every Sunday service for 30 years, said she didn't recognize her and had never seen her before. I tucked the blue box under the seat of my truck before Nora and Beckett walked out. I told them I'd be behind them for lunch, said I needed to make a stop. I drove home to Meadow Fork Road, poured myself a coffee I didn't drink, set the blue box on my kitchen table, and stared at it for a long time. In 31 years, the cases that had kept me up at night were never the dramatic ones. They were always the quiet ones, the ones where everything looked fine on the surface, where the people involved were church-going and well-spoken and lived in nice houses. Those were the cases where the damage ran deepest. I opened the box. Before I tell you what was inside, I want you to hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications, because this story goes places I still haven't fully made peace with, and you're going to want to be with it from beginning to end. Leave a comment right now. Tell me what you think was in that box. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story about how the truth doesn't stay buried forever, share this video with them. Now, let's go. Inside the blue box were 4 things. The first was a photograph. A color photo, recent by the look of it, printed on standard photo paper. It showed Beckett Harlow standing in front of what looked like a house in a tidy suburban neighborhood. Beckett, clearly recognizable, in the same blue sport coat he'd worn to our Christmas dinner last year, was standing beside a woman I didn't recognize, a pretty woman in her early 30s with red hair and a wide smile, and in front of them, a little girl, maybe 4 years old, holding a birthday balloon. All 3 of them smiling at whoever was taking the picture. The kind of photo that ends up on refrigerators. The kind of photo families take. The second item was a folded document. When I opened it, my hands were steadier than they had any right to be. 31 years of detective work will do that to you. The document was a marriage certificate, issued in Davidson County, Tennessee, dated 4 years ago, 14 months before Beckett married my daughter. The groom's name on the certificate was Beckett James Harlow. The bride's name was Lena Carver Harlow. My daughter's married name was Nora Caulfield Harlow. Beckett was already married when he walked down the aisle with my daughter. The third item was a handwritten note. The handwriting was neat, controlled, the kind of handwriting that belongs to someone who is trying to stay calm while writing something that makes her hands shake. It said, "His real wife is Lena Harlow. They have a daughter named Sophie. He told Lena he travels for work. He's been living 2 lives for 3 years. She doesn't know about your daughter. Your daughter doesn't know about her. I'm Lena's older sister. I found your family through his phone when he left it at our house at Thanksgiving. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I had to do it this way. I was afraid of what he'd do if I approached you directly. He has a temper. Please be careful. My number is at the bottom of this page. Please call me. Sylvia Carver." The fourth item was a USB drive. I did not plug it in immediately. 20 years of evidence handling teaches you to document first and react second. I went through the house room by room, the way I used to clear buildings in my early patrol days. It's a habit that never fully leaves you. Then I sat back down at the table and picked up my phone. I dialed the number Sylvia had written at the bottom of the note. She answered on the second ring. "Mr. Caulfield," she said. She'd been expecting my call. "You were at the church this morning," I said. "I've been trying to figure out how to reach your daughter for 6 weeks," she said. "I followed him once, saw which church you all attended. I didn't know who you were at first, but I figured out you were her father. And then I found out what you used to do for work." She paused. "I thought a retired detective might know what to do with what I found. Better than me walking up to your daughter alone." Her voice was steady but thin. The voice of someone who'd been carrying something terrible for a long time and was finally setting it down. "Tell me everything," I said. Sylvia Carver was 57 years old. She taught high school history in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Her younger sister, Lena, was 34 and worked as a pediatric nurse at Vanderbilt Medical Center in Nashville. Lena had met Beckett Harlow at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue 4.5 years ago. He'd been charming, attentive, exactly the kind of man who makes a woman feel like the only person in the room. They'd married a year after meeting. Their daughter Sophie had just turned 3. Beckett told Lena he worked commercial real estate with clients across East Tennessee. He was frequently away Monday through Thursday, sometimes longer. He always had an explanation, a closing, a site visit, a development meeting. He called every evening at 7, consistent, reliable, present in all the ways that mattered from a distance. He was also, according to everything Sylvia had found, simultaneously building the exact same life 185 miles away in Harrowfield. "When did you first suspect something was wrong?" I asked. "Lena noticed things before I did," Sylvia said. "Small things. He'd come home and seem off, distracted in a specific way, like he was recalibrating. She thought it was work stress." A pause. "I've been divorced twice. I know what recalibrating looks like." She'd found his second phone at Thanksgiving. He'd set it down on the kitchen counter for 40 seconds while he helped carry dishes from the car. 40 seconds was enough. "It wasn't locked?" I asked. "He didn't expect to leave it," she said. "There were text messages, photos, from Nora. Enough for me to understand what I was looking at. It took me 6 weeks to figure out who your daughter was, who you were, and how to reach you without him finding out." "Why didn't you go to the police?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "He hasn't broken any laws I can prove on my own," she said. Then a pause. "Not yet." There it was. "What's on the drive?" I asked. Screenshots of his messages. Bank records I found in the glove box of his car when he went into the grocery store. I photographed them through the window. And something else. She took a long breath. Voice recordings. He doesn't know about them. Lena started recording their arguments 3 months ago because he'd been rewriting history, saying things that hadn't happened, denying conversations she knew had taken place. I told her to document everything. She didn't know exactly why I was asking. I wasn't ready to tell her what I knew yet. Because you were trying to protect her, I said. Because I was scared, she said quietly. You mentioned he has a temper. He's put a hole in a wall. He's never touched Lena, but he's put a hole in a wall, and the way he looks at her when she asks the wrong question. She stopped. I know that look. I've seen it before. I thanked her. I told her I would handle it carefully and that she should contact me immediately if Beckett's behavior changed, if Lena's situation changed, if she felt unsafe for any reason. Then I plugged in the USB drive. You have to understand something about spending 31 years in law enforcement. You build a very specific relationship with evidence. You learn to look at it without emotion first, to read it the way you'd read a weather report, just data, just facts. And only after you understand what it means do you allow yourself to feel it. I looked at the bank records first. Beckett had a joint account with Lena in Nashville. He had a joint account with Nora in Harrowfield. He also maintained a personal savings account in his name only at a bank in Chattanooga. The records Sylvia had photographed showed regular transfers into the Chattanooga account from both joint accounts. Not large amounts. Not the kind of amounts that trigger automatic review. $400 here, $300 there. Consistent enough to be a pattern. Inconsistent enough to look like normal fluctuation to someone not looking for it. Over 3 years, those transfers added up to something close to $43,000. Then I listened to the voice recordings. There were 7 of them. Arguments between Lena and Beckett, recorded while her phone sat on a kitchen counter or in a coat pocket. I won't take you through all of them, but I'll tell you about the last one, recorded 8 days before that Sunday morning in church. It's the one that changed everything I was planning to do. The argument was about Sophie, about a medical appointment Sophie needed and whether Beckett would be back in time to take her. Lena was frustrated. She said something that has stayed with me since the moment I heard it. She said, "You are the only person I've got left, Beckett. My parents are gone. Sylvia is the only family I have. You are my family, Sophie's family. Don't treat that like it doesn't matter." And Beckett said, I know that. His voice, when he said it, was soft and genuine in a way that made my stomach drop. Because it didn't sound like the voice of a man performing for his wife. It sounded like the voice of a man who knew exactly what he had and had decided, consciously and deliberately, to keep it at any cost, including the cost of my daughter. I called my old partner, Rourke Delaney, at 9 o'clock that night. Rourke had retired 2 years before me and spent most of his days fishing on Norris Lake and complaining about his knee. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Gerald," he said, "you eat?" "Not tonight," I said. "I need your eyes on something. Can you come over?" Rourke was at my kitchen table within 40 minutes, which told me he'd driven faster than a man with a bad knee had any right to. He looked at the photograph, read the marriage certificate, listened to the last voice recording without expression, the way we'd both trained ourselves to do. When it was over, he was quiet for a moment. "Bigamy," he said. "Felony in Tennessee," I said. "Class A misdemeanor at minimum. Can go considerably higher depending on circumstances." "He's been running 2 households for 3 years, Rourke said. 2 women, a child with one of them. He shook his head slowly. Financial exploitation. Depending on how those transfers were made and what he told each woman about the money's purpose, you could be looking at wire fraud. I know. Gerald. He looked at me directly. Nora. I know, I said again. She's going to be destroyed. I know that too. I'd been sitting with that knowledge since I opened the box. My daughter who had her mother's eyes and her mother's stubborn jaw and her mother's ability to see through every excuse I'd ever made. My daughter who had called me 3 weeks before, asking whether I thought Beckett seemed distant lately, and I'd told her he was probably tired from work. My daughter who had already been through losing her mother and who had needed Beckett to be exactly what he appeared to be. How do you want to play it? Rourke asked. Carefully, I said. I talked to a lawyer before I talked to Nora, and I need to know Lena Harlow is safe before anything happens that might make Beckett panic and do something I can't predict. You think he'd hurt her? I think desperate people do things you don't see coming, I said. I spent 31 years learning that lesson. Diane Merrick had been my divorce attorney when Patricia and I had a rough stretch in the early 2000s. We'd worked things out and never ended up needing her services, but she'd handled the preliminary work with such quiet, straightforward competence that I'd never forgotten it. She'd grown her practice since then, worked out of a clean little office above the pharmacy on Caldwell Street in Harrowfield, and specialized in exactly the kinds of cases that don't announce themselves loudly. I called her first thing Monday morning. She was at my kitchen table by 10 o'clock with a yellow legal pad and reading glasses and the particular stillness that good lawyers carry when they're absorbing important information. I walked her through everything: the box, Sylvia, the marriage certificate, the bank records, the recordings. She asked 3 questions. Where is the original marriage certificate registered? Davidson County. Have you independently verified that the certificate is authentic? Not yet, but I had a call in. Has he had any contact with Nora since Sunday? Sunday dinner, which I had not attended, citing stomach trouble. Diane wrote for several minutes without speaking. All right, she said finally. First, the bigamy is the anchor. If the Davidson County marriage was never legally dissolved, then Beckett's marriage to Nora is void. She is not legally his wife, which means any joint financial decisions made under that marriage are potentially challengeable in civil court. The joint account, I said. Exactly. If she's been contributing to an account as his legal spouse and the marriage was never valid, that money has a recoverable path. She tapped her pen on the legal pad. Second, the financial transfers. You'll need a forensic accountant to trace those properly. $43,000 over 3 years is significant, and depending on what he told each woman about the money's purpose, you could be looking at fraud with real teeth. And third? Third. She looked at me steadily. Nora has to know before this goes any further. I understand the instinct to build the case first and protect her second. That instinct makes sense given what you've done for 30 years. But Gerald, she is at the center of this. She has the right to make decisions about her own life with full information. The longer you wait, the more betrayed she will feel when she finds out you knew. I knew she was right. I'd known it since Sunday night. The question was how. Nora had always been a Tuesday person. Monday she was in catch-up mode. By Wednesday she was in her stride. But Tuesday morning she had a ritual. Coffee on the back porch of the house on Birchwood Lane, just 30 minutes before work, watching the birds at the feeders she'd put up after her mother died. Patricia had been a bird watcher. It was Nora's way of keeping her close. I drove over Tuesday morning with a box of her favorite pastries from Linwood's Bakery. She heard my truck in the driveway and met me at the back gate with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You missed dinner Sunday, she said. I know. I'm sorry. I sat down across from her at the little porch table, the one with the mosaic top Patricia had found at a flea market in Gatlinburg. I have something I need to talk to you about, sweetheart. Nora went still. She'd seen me deliver bad news before, had been in the room when I'd come home heavy from difficult cases, had watched me sit down across from people and change their lives with words. She recognized the posture. What happened? She asked. I told her. Not all at once. Slowly. The way you deliver something that needs time to be absorbed. The way a doctor gives a serious diagnosis piece by piece, giving the person in front of you the chance to process before the next thing arrives. The stranger at church. The blue box. The photograph. I put the photograph on the table between us. She looked at it for a long time. The marriage certificate. I read the names aloud. She didn't speak. The note from Sylvia. The bank records. I didn't play the voice recordings yet. I didn't think she was ready for the sound of his voice. When I finished, the birds were still working the feeders, a pair of Carolina wrens that Patricia would have known by name. Nora picked up the marriage certificate and looked at it for a very long time without moving. 14 months before we got married, she said finally. Yes. He was already married. Yes. Our marriage isn't legal. According to Diane Merrick, if the Davidson County marriage was never dissolved, then no. Diane can verify that within 24 hours. Nora set the certificate down very carefully, like it was something that might shatter. She looked out at the birds. Mom said something to me before the wedding, she said quietly. My throat tightened. What did she say? She said she couldn't put her finger on why, but something about Beckett felt like a house with a locked room. She paused. I told her she was being a mother. She laughed then, a short, broken sound that was nowhere near funny but had nowhere else to go. She was right, I said. She was always right. Nora pressed both hands flat on the table. She was her mother's daughter in every way that mattered, and right now I watched the grief and the fury move through her in waves, watched her breathe through it the way Patricia had breathed through hard things, slowly, with her jaw set and her eyes open. Is Lena safe? That was the first question my daughter asked. Not about herself, not about the money, not about the marriage she'd just learned had never legally existed. She asked about the woman she'd never met who was also being lied to. I looked at my daughter and felt something shift in my chest, something large and permanent. Sylvia is watching her, I said. We're moving carefully. She has a little girl, Nora said, 3 years old. Sophie, Nora said, recalling the name from the note. She said it quietly, like she was learning something important about the shape of the world. What happened over the next 3 weeks moved faster than I expected once it started moving. Diane Merrick confirmed within 18 hours that the Davidson County marriage license for Beckett James Harlow and Lena Carver Harlow was valid and had never been dissolved. There was no divorce filing, no annulment, nothing on record but the original certificate. Nora's marriage to Beckett was legally void from the first day. The Harrowfield County Sheriff's Department, 2 of whose senior deputies I had trained personally, took the bigamy evidence seriously and contacted the Davidson County DA's office. The financial records were handed to a forensic accountant who spent 4 days tracing the Chattanooga account transfers. The number, when she finished, wasn't $43,000. It was $61,400. The earlier transfers had been smaller, easier to miss, going back further than Sylvia had seen. I called Sylvia every 2 days during those 3 weeks. She was holding together with the particular strength of a woman who has decided to see something through to the end. Lena still didn't know. Sylvia was waiting for the right moment, waiting until the legal process was far enough along that Lena would have support and structure around her when the truth arrived, not just devastation and open air. How is she? I asked every time I called. She asked me last week why I seemed worried, Sylvia said. I told her I had a difficult situation with a student. She believed me. A pause. She trusts people, Lena does. Always has. It's the best thing about her, and it's the thing that put her here. Trusting people isn't a flaw, I said. Other people's choices are the flaw. Sylvia was quiet for a moment. Your daughter is lucky to have you. She's not lucky, I said. She's just mine. Same as Lena is yours. Beckett was arrested on a Thursday morning. I know because Rourke called me while it was happening. He had a contact at the Davidson County Sheriff's Office who kept him informed. They picked Beckett up in the parking garage of a Knoxville office building at 8:14 in the morning. He had his laptop bag over one shoulder and a coffee cup in his other hand when the deputies approached him. He didn't run. That surprised me, for about 3 seconds. Then I realized it shouldn't have. Running is what guilty people do when they haven't thought things through. Beckett had spent 3 years thinking things through. He'd just finally run out of moves. He was charged with bigamy, financial fraud, and wire fraud. His attorney entered a not guilty plea. The judge set bail at $75,000. And I was told, though not officially, that Beckett's expression in the courthouse was the expression of a man who had, for the very first time in 3 years, run completely out of road. Lena found out from Sylvia that same Thursday evening. Sylvia drove to Nashville, sat down at her sister's kitchen table with a cup of tea, and told her everything she'd spent 6 weeks carrying. Sylvia called me afterward. Her voice was exhausted and stripped clean, the way people sound when they finally put down something very heavy after carrying it too long. How did she take it? I asked. She didn't say anything for a long time, Sylvia said. Then she asked if Sophie could sit with her. So I got Sophie from her room and they sat together on the couch, and Lena just held her. She stopped for a moment. She's going to be okay. She needs time, but she's going to be okay. And you? I asked. Ask me again in a year, she said. Nora filed for annulment with Diane's help. Because the marriage was legally void from the start, the process was technically straightforward, though nothing about it felt straightforward to anyone living through it. Diane pursued the recovery of the funds taken from the joint account and won. $61,400 returned plus legal fees. Nora asked to meet Lena. I thought it was too soon. Nora told me, with her mother's jaw set and her mother's eyes completely clear, that she would decide when it was too soon. They met at a coffee shop in Nashville 6 weeks after the arrests. I didn't go. It wasn't mine to witness. Nora told me about it afterward, sitting on the back porch in the early December cold, the bird feeders empty for the season. She's good, Nora said. She's not okay yet, but she's good. Sophie drew me a picture. Of what? Birds, Nora said. Lena told her I liked birds. I looked out at the empty feeders, Patricia's feeders. Your mother would have had something to say about all of this, I said. She would have said she knew from the beginning something was off and that we should have listened to her. She would have been right. She always was. Nora reached over and put her hand on mine. Dad. Sylvia, I want to send her something. Is that strange? What do you want to send her? I don't know yet. Something that says thank you. Something real. She paused. She pressed a box into a stranger's hands in the middle of a church service because she didn't know what else to do. Because she was trying to protect her sister and she thought maybe a retired detective would know what to do with the truth. She shook her head slowly. She trusted a stranger, a complete stranger, because she had no other option. She trusted the right one, I said. Nora squeezed my hand. Yeah, she said. She did. The trial was set for late spring. Beckett's attorney negotiated hard. The final outcome, a plea agreement that included a felony conviction, 2 years of supervised probation, mandatory restitution to both Lena and Nora, and a permanent financial monitoring order, wasn't everything I'd wanted. It was what the system could deliver, and I've spent 31 years learning to make peace with the gap between those two things. At the sentencing hearing, Nora sat on one side of the courtroom. Lena and Sylvia sat on the other. They hadn't coordinated it. They'd simply arrived and found their seats, and it turned out that way. When Beckett was led in, he looked smaller than I remembered. People tend to do that when the performance stops. He didn't look at Nora. He didn't look at Lena. He looked at the floor, and then at his attorney, and then at the judge. And he kept his eyes where the law required them, and nowhere else. The judge read the terms of the agreement, the restitution figure, the probationary conditions, the felony on his permanent record. Beckett said, "Yes, Your Honor, in all the right places," with a careful, calibrated tone that I recognized from 31 years of watching people perform contrition in courtrooms. I thought about what Sylvia had told me. That Beckett had a temper. That he'd put a hole in a wall. That he looked at Lena a certain way when she asked the wrong questions. I thought about the voice recording. I know that, said softly, genuinely, to a wife he had decided to keep at any cost. I thought about my daughter on this side of the aisle, and about a 3-year-old named Sophie who drew birds for strangers, and I thought about a silver-haired woman who had walked into a Tennessee church on an October morning, pressed a blue box into a stranger's hands, and trusted that the truth, placed in the right hands, would find its way. It did. My daughter Nora celebrated her 34th birthday in March. We had dinner at Benedetto's, the quiet Italian place on Main Street in Harrowfield, where the bread is warm, and the owner has known our family long enough to remember Patricia. Rourke came, Diane came, a few of Nora's friends from her book club came. The owner brought out an extra basket of bread without being asked. Sylvia came too. She'd driven up from Murfreesboro. She sat at the far end of the table at first, quiet in the way of someone absorbing a new context. But Nora had placed her there deliberately, and by the time dessert arrived, Sylvia and Rourke were arguing cheerfully about the best fishing spots on the Cumberland River, and the table was warm with the particular energy of people who have been through hard things and have chosen, consciously and deliberately, to come out the other side. I watched it all from my end of the table, the same end where the birthday cake arrived with too many candles to count, where Nora blew them out and made a wish she didn't share. After dinner, walking to my truck in the cold March air, Sylvia caught up to me. "Thank you," she said, "for answering when I called, for doing it the right way." "You put the truth in the right hands," I said. "All I did was know what to do with it." She nodded slowly. "Lena took Sophie to the Nashville Zoo last weekend," she said. "First real outing since everything. Sophie spent 45 minutes watching the flamingos. Didn't want to leave. She smiled, and it was the first time I'd seen that smile reach her eyes. She said the flamingos were her favorite because they were pink and brave." "Pink and brave," I repeated. "Kids know things," Sylvia said. "They do," I agreed. She got into her car. I got into my truck and sat there for a minute before starting the engine, looking up at the March sky over Harrowfield, Tennessee, where the stars were out and the mountains were dark shapes on the horizon, and the town was the same as it had always been, full of people carrying things you'd never guess from the outside. I thought about the Sunday morning in Calvary Ridge Baptist, the fourth pew from the front, the hymn rising through the old whitewashed walls, the weight of a small blue box pressed into my hands by a woman who trusted that the right person would know what to do with it. 31 years. Every case I ever worked, every piece of evidence I ever carried, every truth I ever helped drag into the light. It all led somewhere. I used to think the somewhere was the career, the conviction rate, the closed files, the retirement ceremony. I know better now. Sometimes the place all of it leads is a Tuesday morning on a back porch in Tennessee, sitting with your daughter, watching birds at feeders your wife put up before she died, hearing your daughter ask not about the money or herself, but whether a stranger named Lena and her little girl are safe. That's the somewhere. That's where all of it was always going. You know what gets me about this story? It wasn't the bigamy. It wasn't even the money. It was the 40 seconds. Beckett left his phone on a counter for 40 seconds. And that's all it took for the whole thing to unravel. 31 years of careful lying, undone in less than a minute. Because here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. People who live double lives aren't as smart as they think they are. They just count on the people around them being too trusting to look. So if something feels off, if your gut is telling you there's a locked room somewhere, listen to it. Your instincts aren't paranoia, they're information. Gerald's wife Patricia knew. Nora felt it. Even Sylvia, a stranger, knew enough to act. Don't wait for a blue box to show up in your hands before you start paying attention to what's right in front of you.